97.3 ESPN.com. We've got some little bit of Eagles news today. We'll touch on that. A lot of NFL stuff I want to get to John with. Also, John, I know the NBA trade deadline today. John covered the NBA for a long time as well, and John and I have had our sparring matches on the Sixers. Sixers quiet today at the deadline, but they did make a very Henke-esque move today, John, did they not?
Hey, they finally got a Joel. And what's the over-under on the healthy Joel for that joke?
Does he ever put a? Does this Joel ever put a uniform on?
I don't think so. But well, you never know. You never know with that team.
It was a very Henke deal though. They got a second-round pick. They're continuing to.
They got a second-round pick to basically take $2.5 million. So. I don't think he has a guarantee after this year. So, yeah, that's the classic Hinkie salary dump to take up and go in this direction. And it's, it would have been nice to have some relevancy and pull off a big trade, but I think they were behind the eight ball simply because they can't afford to trade one of the guys they're going to have to trade at some point, talking about Okafor or Noel. Until they see if Joel Embiid can get on the floor. So it's really, really difficult to pull that trigger until you're completely sure.
John, I know some say nothing major. I thought Cleveland getting Fry, that was to me anyway, that they were, trying to match up better with a team. Verjao, a big man, that's not a great matchup for. So I thought Cleveland, did a good job of trying to make a run for the championship, which is obviously on their mind. But not a lot of big movement in the NBA today. Markieff Morris finally out of Phoenix after a long battle there. He went to Washington. But I thought the Cleveland deal was the biggest.
Yeah, everybody every year is hoping the big names, whether it be Dwight Howard this time or Blake Griffin perhaps, and it never happens. As you mentioned, I covered that league for a long time. Usually is a dud of a firecracker at the trade deadline. This year, a little bit more than normal years, believe it or not. There were at least some serviceable parts, as you mentioned, that moved around, and that's something. But it's really difficult in season to make the big trades, and I think people need to understand that and sort of temper their expectations back at the trade deadline.
Yeah, a couple other names. Lance Stevenson to Memphis, which I think is interesting, because they lose Gasol. We don't know for how long, but that's a team that I thought, John, could be an interesting team because they play defense. With Gasol, I don't know if that changes, but if they could, I was saying a couple of weeks ago, if they made a trade to get an underrated scorer and the way they play defense, could they muck up a series against Golden State if they ended up playing as like a dark horse team? We also saw the deal with Kirk Heinrich getting traded to Atlanta, which is kind of interesting because we thought Atlanta was kind of trying to get rid of pieces there. So a quiet day in the NBA, but let's jump over to the football where, real quick, we'll mention the Eagles signed a backup quarterback here. Give us a little details on that because, you hear backup quarterback Eagles, you think Chase Daniel, but no free agency yet. He couldn't move, but they do bring in a developmental guy.
Yeah, they brought in McLeod Bethel Thompson. I think it's more of a third-string guy. He's been a journeyman for years. He's been about everywhere. And numerous stops. San Francisco, for one, he's been there 3 times. He's been with the Vikings, the Dolphins, the Patriots. And what he does do, he's got a cannon of an arm. He's never had great accuracy, though. But I think he's got a legitimate chance to be this team's third-string quarterback. And I think it shows you the shift in philosophy because last year it was Thad Lewis. This year they brought in, this guy is a prototypical pocket-style passer. Big guy, 6'4", about 230. And as I said, he can throw the football with the best of them. So that's what Doug Peterson wants. He wants the pocket-style passers. And, let's not overstate it. If you're any NFL team and you have to play your third-string quarterback, you're in trouble. But I think it shows you more than anything the shift in philosophy at that particular position.
Yep, and I like the way you explain that. John's with us. CSN Philly reporting the Philadelphia DA is pushing back against issuing an arrest warrant for the Lesean McCoy case in his alleged involvement in that nightclub brawl. Basically the DA's office has questions about the conduct of the officers that evening. So it sounds like today was a good break for Lesean McCoy.
Yeah, and let's face it, it's 2:45 in the morning. If there's a fight, both sides are involved in it. It doesn't necessarily excuse either side, but obviously you hear police officers and you think Lesean McCoy is going to be in a heap of trouble, and he still may be. And certainly when you have the mayor of Philadelphia coming out so high profile, in a high profile fashion, and saying he should be indicted, he should go to jail, all of that nonsense, which is not his place. There's a lot of pressure for the DA's office, but you have to investigate, and it's pretty clear that both sides are probably at risk of starting the fight, and just because one side won doesn't necessarily mean the other side wasn't involved in some egregious conduct in their own right. To me, in the bigger picture, whether he's indicted or not, he's still a knucklehead. That part of it doesn't change, and the fact that he's out there in these types of situations, putting himself in there, and by all accounts, obviously, he was one of the ones throwing punches and kicking people. And when you're a high-profile athlete, you got to be smart enough to avoid those types of situations. This isn't a teenager like Okafor or somebody like that. This is supposed to be a veteran guy who understands that by this point.
Yeah, all right, John, a couple other things. Ann Rappaport tweeted earlier, was asked about the Eagles' quarterback situation. One name to watch is Chase Daniel. I think everybody connected the dots there, but he continued in the tweet by saying, Coach Doug Peterson views him as more than a backup. Not a report, but almost like in passing, oh, by the way, Doug likes this guy. Read the tea leaves for us.
Yeah, well, the tea leaves have been there. And I think it just gained more traction. We've been talking about it for how long? Because Ian came out and said it. It's an obvious fit. I said, dating back to when he was with New Orleans, the Saints thought really, really highly of Chase Daniel. Same thing with Doug Peterson. If you remember back to his college career at Missouri, he was a tremendous player. I think he was a finalist for the Heisman. His issue coming out of college was the fact of his size. And back then, even more, remember, this is before Russell Wilson winning the Super Bowl. Now I think that mentality that you got to be 6'4", 6'5" to play the position in the NFL, it's changing a little bit. They still would prefer that. And I think if worse comes to worse, I would rather have Chase Daniel at a pretty decent salary cap figure than Sam Bradford at $20 million. I'll be honest about that. I think it makes more sense.
John's with us. McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Jared Allen retires today. And, as Jared Allen plays in the Super Bowl in his final season there, he kind of had a great career with a couple of different teams there. And I think a very underrated guys, but maybe one of the better guys to play that position when, in the middle part of the 2000s.
Yeah, he's one of the best pass rushers of this generation. You could argue the best. I got to see him up close in Minnesota for years, and it was interesting because Kansas City, his first team, used to, back in the day, they used to practice in Wisconsin in something called the Cheese League, and every year the Vikings and Chiefs would sort of have dual practices, and one would travel to in Wisconsin. The Vikings would do that one year, and the next year the Chiefs would go to Mankato. And I got to see Jared Allen up close before he was Jared Allen, and I remember him in individual drills just beating the drum out of people. And I just said, who the heck is this kid? Such quickness. And he basically defines, you always say it's cliched now, the nonstop motor. He was the first guy. He never, ever stops. To the day he left that field on Super Bowl 50. And that's why he's as great as he is. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. As I said, I would argue he's the best pass rusher of this generation. He's also a good guy, and I think if you saw his retirement tweet, it was a classic. He's an old cowboy, and he rode off into the sunset, even though there was no sunset, a cloudy day.
Yeah, John, give us your feelings on Jason Pierre-Paul, what's going to happen in that situation. I know it's a weird situation, but it sounded like they were surprised at what he gave them, but maybe not surprised enough to give him long-term money.
No, he lost a lot of money, let's face it, by that accident. He gave them more than I thought. I'll be honest about that. He still looked, obviously, he had the explosion. He's always been the tremendous athlete, but he was playing with that club, and he really, really had a tough time tackling. And I don't know if that's going to change from this point forward. So you're talking about a guy who would have gotten the big pass rusher type deal if he hung around, if he signed the franchise tender last year and went back into free agency this year, or if he and continued to play at a high level. Now you got a guy who's intriguing because he still has that same skill set, but there's one big deficiency, and that's not changing. So he's going to play somewhere, but I don't know if the Giants want to go long-term on him. I don't know if anybody else wants to, and it's just really, really difficult. I mean, that was a catastrophic injury, and he's never going to be the Jason Pierre-Paul of before that particular fireworks accident.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a weird situation, and you're right. I mean, we talked about it in reference to Thomas Davis when we were getting closer to the Super Bowl, that, all right, this guy's going to be out there, but is he going to be able to wrap and tackle? And you saw what his arm looked like when, boy, that was really a nasty picture of his arm. It almost looked like a football, like stitched up with the stitch. I mean, it was crazy. And that basically JPP's got to play the rest of his career in that kind of mode there. So, it's a sad story of what happened to him because, he was a really great player, and seeing that kind of change for him and how it changed his game. We talked about, moving forward with Sam Bradford and Chase Daniel here. But, do you think as the days move on, does that mean anything, or could the Eagles just one day, 3 days from now say, you know what, we're going to franchise you? Or you think if it hasn't happened by now that it's not going to happen?
I mean, I don't think it was going to happen. I don't think it's all that serious of a discussion with the Eagles. And they could always change their mind. They have to March 1st. Stranger things have happened. But I think their mentality is, hey, not necessarily that they don't want him back, but they're going to tell him, if you think you're going to get $20 million or, God forbid, 25 as his agent wants, go out to the open market, see what you can get, and come back to us, and we'll see if we can match it. I think that's their mentality. And I think there's a possibility if it comes in at 15, 16, 17, they would have a serious discussion and say, okay, let's do this. Let's move forward with Sam Bradford. When I say they shouldn't move forward with him, it's not because I think there are better options out there, or I think Chase Daniel would play better than he would next season. It's simply because of the money, nothing else. He's not a $20 million quarterback. And if somebody is going to lose their mind because they're quarterback starved or because they're desperate, you have to let that play out. You can't fool yourself into giving out bad contracts. And the one thing I have confidence in Howie Roseman talked about it a little bit yesterday, is I don't think he will give out bad contracts. I think he's too smart for that. And that's where they are with Sam Bradford. So it's basically test yourself on the market, see where you are, and then maybe the Eagles will get involved.
John, quick one that you tweeted out or retweeted there. The Eagles and college scouting coordinator Matt Lindsay mutually agreeing to part ways. Is this a sign, too, that Howie Roseman is kind of changing some things?
Yeah, I mean, the whole department's going to be remade after the draft. They kind of shelved the search for the new chief of personnel, who they're going to hire somebody after the draft. Tom Donahue, the ex-Steelers general manager, is handling that job right now. But he doesn't want it long term. So the new guy's going to handle that particular part of the job, and that's going to be the day-to-day operations of the personnel department. He's going to report to Howie Roseman, and that's the guy who's going to be in charge of handling the new director of college scouting and talk about who the scouts are going to be. But there's no question, as we go into this draft season and the combine coming up and all the pro days, the Eagles are short-handed in that particular department. And obviously everybody's concerned in this city because not a lot of people have confidence in Howie Roseman. But it's his show, and we're going to see how it works out.
Yes, we are. He'll have the draft, and, of course, we'll be all over the draft coverage here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, more on the NFL, J.F. McMullen, and check out 97.3 ESPN.com. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, Mike.